Imagine owning a piece of land, right? And then you wake up one day and it's become a public road. Everybody's using it, but you're the only one who owns it, and you're certainly not getting paid for it. Well, for one man, this wasn't just a bad dream. It was a 30-year nightmare that went all the way to his country's highest court. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to see how this whole mess started, follow the crazy twists and turns in the courts, and then finally, we'll unpack what this whole case really means for property owners. So, let's start at the beginning. Our story kicks off with a man named Mr. Chang. He owned 2 plots of land that, well, they'd become the center of a legal battle that would drag on for decades. Now, for years, everything seemed totally normal. His land was marked to become part of a new public road, and the government had a plan to buy it. But then, in 1989, something really weird happened. His plots just vanished from the purchase list. They were crossed right out. And just a year later, it basically became a public street anyway, because new homes were being built and they needed access. So for the next 30 years, he was stuck with property he couldn't use, while everyone else got a free road at his expense. And this is the real head-scratcher, right? This was the core question of his entire fight. I mean, all around him, other landowners were getting paid as part of this road project. But not him. He was forced to carry this public burden all by himself. And that feeling of inequality is what finally pushed him to go to court. So, Mr. Chang takes his fight to the High Administrative Court. His argument was pretty simple. The government's failure to buy his land while it was buying up his neighbor's land was just fundamentally unfair. And the court's whole decision hinged on this really powerful legal idea called a special sacrifice. Think of it like this. We all have duties as citizens. We follow laws, we pay taxes. But the government can't just force one person to shoulder some massive, out-of-proportion burden for the public good without paying them for it. That's not a normal duty. That's a special sacrifice. The High Court's logic here was honestly pretty brilliant. They pointed to another case that said even a minor issue, like running some utility pipes under someone's land, requires compensation. So they reasoned, if a tiny intrusion like that deserves payment, then a complete loss of your land's use? Yeah, that definitely has to be compensated. And they agreed with Mr. Chang. The court ruled that the government's failure to buy his land did, in fact, create a special sacrifice, and they ordered the city to purchase the land from him. After 30 long years, it felt like a massive, massive victory. But it's never that easy, right? The story doesn't end there. The Tainan city government was not about to just write a check. Instead of accepting the ruling, they decided to fight back. Yep, they were not happy with that decision. So the city appealed to the Supreme Administrative Court. This kicked the case up to the final level, and it set the stage for a really shocking outcome. And this is where the whole thing just gets turned on its head. Just when it looked like Mr. Chang was finally going to get some justice, the case took a completely unexpected turn at the country's highest administrative court. In a pretty stunning decision, the Supreme Court completely overturned the High Court's ruling. After that brief moment of victory, Mr. Chang had lost. His land was still a road, and the government still didn't have to pay him a dime for it. This slide really lays bare the legal drama. You've got 2 top-tier courts looking at the exact same facts and coming to polar opposite conclusions. The High Court said the government's failure to act, its omission, was the problem. But the Supreme Court drew this incredibly fine line, saying, no, special sacrifice only counts when the government actively does something to cause the loss. So how on earth does that happen? How can 2 courts be so far apart? Well, it all boiled down to a single, razor-sharp legal distinction about what caused what. This one sentence, right here, this is what sealed Mr. Chang's fate. The Supreme Court basically argued that you only get compensation when the government is, and this is key, lawfully exercising its public power. Think of them officially building a road or seizing land. The big question was, did that actually happen here? The Supreme Court traced the chain of events completely differently. They said, look, the government's 1989 decision wasn't some mistake. It was an intentional choice not to buy the land.
The real key event, in their eyes, happened a year later when Mr. Chang's neighbors, private citizens, are the ones who designated his land as their access road so they could get their building permits. So, from the court's perspective, the damage was caused by private action, not public action. And if the state didn't cause the problem, well, it had no legal duty to fix it. So, what on earth does this stunning verdict mean for the rest of us? Well, it reveals some really crucial limits on these kinds of claims, and it sets a very, very high bar for anyone else seeking compensation in a similar spot. Okay, the big takeaway here is that the bar for a special sacrifice claim is just incredibly high. You have to prove that your loss came directly from a lawful government action, not its inaction. The court drew this really sharp line in the sand between the government doing something versus simply allowing something to happen. It's a tough lesson. Just because a situation feels deeply unfair, that's not always enough to win in court. Mr. Chang's 30-year fight ended with a very clear legal answer from the Supreme Court. But it leaves all of us with a much bigger and maybe much harder question about what justice really is. If the courts can't step in, then whose job is it to fix a system that lets one person carry a burden that was clearly meant for everyone?